In this video, we're going to take a look at the sales pipeline. There won't be too much talk about technology in this one. It's important to understand why the pipeline is a useful concept, how it helps us keep individual opportunities on track, what it looks like when you lose control of a deal versus being consistent and disciplined. At the same time, you shouldn't get lost inside your own internal processes. So at the end, we'll wrap up with a tip on how to stay focused on the customer. My name is John Walls, and I've worked as a technologist for over 20 years, helping tech companies bring their products to market. I also make videos about it, especially the roles, the tools, and the techniques available to the scientists, technologists, and engineers involved. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The pipeline is a tried and tested way of managing the sales process, and I think of it as having two big benefits. The first being that it works at a higher frequency than just reporting revenue. A sales team is driving and responding to events day by day and week by week. If you have an overall process that takes, say, 5 months to complete, in the high energy environment, sales doesn't make sense to only measure performance at the end of those 5 months. If you can manage a process where a potential deal that starts in January has made clear progress by February, you'll be doing okay. But if you couldn't expect an update before May, you'd have real problems. The day-to-day experience of working in go-to-market therefore revolves around the individual stages of the sales pipeline. The second significant benefit is that it helps you hone in on the question of how we can turn a potential deal into a real signed contract. That move from $4 to $2 represents a conversion rate from qualified opportunities to active evaluations. And it's much easier to think about, say, why only 45% of our new opportunities are converting to trials than it would be to ask why are only 20% getting all of the way through to close. For an intuitive example, just think about going to the supermarket. The financial measure is how much did the people walking through the door pay once they got to the till. But you wouldn't just measure the start and end of the process like that. To make decisions that are going to make a difference, you would be thinking about things like the layout of the store, product promotions, and so on, both for the individual customer journey and for the aggregate overall picture. The sales pipeline typically breaks down then into around 5 to 7 stages. You'll see variations in the exact names and number of stages, but the fundamental concepts stay very consistent in practice. We'll look at each stage in more detail in separate videos, but it goes like this. Demand generation and qualification are about generating new opportunities. Needs analysis and evaluation are about turning these opportunities into solutions that people are ready to pay for. Negotiation and closed are about handling final concerns, wrapping up commercial discussions, and so on. And from closed to renew or expand is all about keeping the customer. For most businesses, profitability being dependent on the customer coming back for more. For you as an individual, work life is a lot easier when you have existing relationships that build on prior success. The general idea is that the further along the process we are, the more effort we invest. This is mirrored on the customer side. They will typically consider many options at the start, put more effort into their shortlist, and so on. For very straightforward reasons, the closer you get to spending real money, the more attention gets paid. The more is at stake, the more is expected of you. Now, is it always this clear and simple? No. And so we do need to be flexible. But most everyone in sales gets their own personal lesson in the dangers of being too flexible. And one common example here that I'll use is the inexperienced buyer who is trying to fly solo. So think of an organization you're familiar with. There's a large town hall meeting underway. Some senior managers on stage are taking questions, and the conversation turns to a new project that one of them is excited about. Imagine how it would go if they answered every single question with, "You don't need to worry about that. I've got everything I need to make the decision." The mood in the room would probably turn sour. And there's a very good chance that person will later be found complaining about how their project was stopped because funding was blocked or another team insisted on a different decision. Everyone in sales has met the person who insists they are the sole decision maker, but usually it just ain't so. What happens is that the process lurches back and forth as the buyer responds to problems they didn't anticipate. The same activities get repeated multiple times, last-minute requests take a great deal of commitment and effort to get done, and just as you think you're coming to the end, a time-consuming process like a formal request for information can suddenly be demanded by the procurement team. And this loss of control doesn't just happen because of inexperienced buyers, of course. It also happens because you as the seller make assumptions. It happens in highly political environments. It can happen when your product is the right choice, but an existing supplier with strong relationships mounts a strong defensive position against the newcomer. A big part of the sales team's job is responding to all of these changing conditions. Some degree of flexibility is required, and in fact the most exciting aspect of working in this space is that sales and marketing are consistently the most responsive teams in a company. Even so, reacting to every little change or customer request ends up with you running in circles. Lots of effort, very little reward. So how do we know when to flex and when to stay firm? The starting point is to remember it's in the interests of both sides of a commercial transaction to have a professional process that ultimately leads to the customer spending their money well. There's some good rules of thumb to keep in mind. Let's start with identifying some of the symptoms of a bad buying process. It's when they want to complete negotiations with the vendor before handing over to procurement. But procurement probably has formal responsibilities that necessitate more time and cost negotiations. Or they want vendors to deliver demonstrations without giving time to asking questions about what the requirements are. And your job usually isn't just to do what a pre-recorded demo on YouTube could do just as well. You're there to show them what is specifically relevant to their requirements. A customer who has no respect for your time and experience is also far less likely to be a profitable customer. In fact, a lot of good buyers will say, we want to share enough information so that we can, in return, get what we need out of this process. And another classic problem is wanting to run trials and projects without actually having any buy-in from their organization to proceed if the project is successful. There's plenty of examples, though, where the account team wants to do things earlier than the pipeline process demands. Here's my 3 big themes. Preparation, learning about the process for onboarding or security requirements or who the procurement team is. Negotiation and security reviews might be late-stage processes, but engaging with the relevant teams and getting visibility of their requirements as soon as possible is always beneficial. Sponsorship. Ultimately, your goal as a vendor should be to contribute to their customer success. To really make that happen, the vendor needs to understand the priorities of their leadership. Now, with some products like Aptio, that process might have started with talking to the C-suite. Others might only spend a significant amount of time with an executive or the budget holder as we're getting closer to the final decision. Either way, it is hugely beneficial to you and to the buyer to have that conversation early on about the goals of the project at the executive level. Do not wait for final sign-off before trying to have that conversation. What you are delivering should be aligned to executive priorities. And finally, multi-threading. Business-to-business sales, especially to large organizations, do not take straight linear paths to a successful outcome. It's good to be multi-threaded, to be able to work in parallel with multiple contacts. It's good to do the same meeting 5 times over if each meeting builds up the relationship with a new team or decision maker. And if we do our jobs well, rather than the crazy ball of string we saw earlier, we end up with something more like this. So we have flexed. We did put in more additional effort into some points. We did repeat some exercises. But at the same time, in some of the activities, we were able to be more efficient. Maybe we were able to prepare ahead or reuse a customer presentation or a prototype. We might still be doing that RFI, but we knew it was coming and we were able to complete the task with less effort. This is what I think of as intentionality. For each activity, we have a clear sense of direction, which means when we're preparing for a customer meeting, for instance, we can set fair expectations. We can prepare good questions. This way, overall, we can flex to changing conditions, but without losing control. What we are trying to achieve is a flywheel effect. The go-to-market machine works best when there is a healthy pace and volume of opportunities going through the pipeline. Ultimately, the challenge is that we cannot control the customer. What we can control is our own actions, where we focus our attention. If we can be consistent and disciplined across multiple opportunities, if we can build momentum, if we can reduce the friction of working with customers, especially unpredictable customers, then we are in a good position to succeed. We'll finish up by turning the whole thing around and thinking from the customer perspective. The customer does not care about our process. They will resent naive or arrogant demands that they should make their decision according to our process. So does that mean we are setting ourselves up in opposition to their interests? Well, if we're being smart as a sales team, absolutely not. We should be thinking about the customer's buying process, not just our selling process. The buying process, in fact, bears a lot of similarities. They have a lot of options at the start. They will narrow it down to a short list, spend more time investigating that short list, and make a final decision from a short list of 2 or 3. There will be multiple people or teams impacted by the decision. There's going to be a financial approval process to work through. There's going to be people insisting the money be spent differently. So one of the signs of a great sales team is an ability to consistently understand the buyer's process, to build up their champions, to give them what they need to get things done on their side. And if you can do that, you will find them much more open to aligning to your process and sharing the information that you need to get results. In the next videos in this series, we'll look at the individual stages and what's involved. It should be a lot more practical than all the theory so far. So thanks for watching.
3, 2, 1.